Hello and welcome to Code Completion. My name is Dimitri, and once again, we'd like to do another one of our host spotlight episodes that we'll release every now and then over the next few months that go over our own background so you can kind of learn a bit more about how we got into development and what our current interests are. So today, we have Johnny here.
Hey everyone.
And we will be skipping complete the code and compiler error, and those will be back next week. But hopefully, we have tons to learn about Johnny so that we can kind of see how we all took our unique paths to get into development and how we got to where we are today. So before we get started, this week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Huuungry. Huuungry, that's Hungry with three U's, is the iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch app you turn to when you really want to eat but are blinded by the multitude of choices available to you and your insatiable hunger. Huuungry isn't here to help you discover new restaurants or flavors. No, it has a much more humble purpose. You tell it all about your favorite restaurants, and it will deploy its cryptographically advanced random number generator invoked by shaking your phone in frustration, to make the decision of what to eat for you. Stuck at home in quarantine and sick of ordering pizza? Use Hungry. Did Hungry just suggest pizza again? Don't fret, as options for another cuisine, a cheaper option, something closer, or simply another option are just a button away. Hungry also comes with a collection of fun animated iMessage stickers so you can share your hunger with others. Thanks again to Hungry for sponsoring our show. Search for Hungry, that's Huuungry, on the App Store today to give it a try. So, Johnny, how did you get into development?
I don't have a typical path. So I actually went to BYU and studied um, business management with an emphasis in organizational behavior and human resources. So definitely not anything tech. Um, I my first job out of college was working in an HR department. So I worked in an HR department. I oversaw like training and development there, and then was sort of the benefits administrator. So pretty much the farthest away thing from being a developer. Um, so after actually working in HR, I realized that it wasn't really something that I loved or that I enjoyed doing, and so I began another job search, really open to any sort of opportunities, um, and went to a tech startup where I worked as a data analyst. So I worked with different clients, helping them sort of write SQL-like queries to format their databases and to kind of give them helpful metrics so that they could make strategic business decisions. And it was as I was learning SQLite that for this job I was like, wow, it's so cool to be able to write a few lines of code, if you will, to sort of solve a problem. And so after that job, I decided to go to a coding boot camp, and um, I've always been like an Apple fanboy. I've always really enjoyed iPhones and Apple tech. And so I knew that the kind of coding I wanted to do was iOS development, and it also helped that my brother had sort of taken that path of getting into iOS development as well. So it was something I was familiar with. So I went to this code boot camp. Um, it was super short. I mean, 6 weeks of instruction and then 6 weeks of sort of project time. And I'd like to say I learned a lot. I don't think that I actually had learned that much. But lucky enough, the company that I work for now, day one, they took a chance on me as an intern, brought me in. I felt like I relearned pretty much everything there, and then yeah, after the internship, I started on full time, and I've been there for about 3 years now. So.
Yeah, it's oftentimes just getting started that's enough to kind of get you in that path. When you were
Yeah.
learning SQL, was that something that they just taught you on the job?
So yeah, so uh they had like a shared credential for like Udemy, for like a Udemy SQL for beginner course. And so when I started there, they're just like, "Here, watch this." And yeah, I sort of learned it from there, and then got like a multitude of questions from all of my different clients because I managed probably anywhere from like 50 to 80 different clients who all have different databases and data sets that they're using, and they all want different things, different KPIs and metrics set up. So it was really just a lot of like, okay, I'll try to figure out the SQL query to be able to get that for you. So but yeah, so it was really just, I didn't come in with any knowledge of SQL at all. It was just all on the job training.
Got it. It seems like you had a lot of problem solving skills to be able to pull that off at all. Otherwise, it's this obscure black box that you're kind of dealing with, and needing to find like new queries to kind of work with that data. That's impressive. So, did you
Yeah.
have any sort of I don't want to say like programming experience because I don't think you did, but any tech fascination aside from being an Apple fanboy, as you said? Like, did you like taking apart computers or customizing them? Anything of the sort before this?
Yeah, honestly, no, it's always just been I started out with my iPod mini, and even I always upgrade my new phones, and I'm that kind of Apple fanboy where it's like I always need the latest in tech. I mean, this started way back when the iPod mini came out, and then the Nano came out shortly, and then the video came out short, and so I kept upgrading to like the latest Apple thing, even when I was still in high school. And yeah, so that was the main fascination for tech, was just, oh, what is Apple doing? This is so cool. So yeah.
Awesome. So, what was it like jumping from six weeks of experience of developing to your first job as an intern? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so the the transition was pretty nice. I was actually really surprised when I had my interview for the internship. It was really relaxed. They asked me one question about like what the difference was between a class and a struct, which I feel like is the only coding question that like my boot camp said like they're gonna ask you this. And so that was like the one question that I was
They're in
prepared for. And so
cahoots.
when they asked, I was like, all right, like they knew exactly what I needed to know. And that was really the only tech question I got in the interview, which looking back on it, it's like they probably should have asked me more because I don't know if I would have passed the interview with more questions. Um, but yeah, it was a pretty smooth transition. They were they understood that I was new. They had people from my boot camp work there before.
Mhm.
So I think they knew kind of what to expect from me. And so it started off with like really small bug fixes of like, change the color of this or move this button 5 points, which, honestly, moving buttons can sometimes take a whole day if you're messing with a bunch of constraints and whatnot. But yeah, the transition was nice. Started with smaller tickets, and then my first big assignment was working with like a share extension. So like rebuilding our entire share extension. And then nobody there had taken ownership for the watch app, and it needed some major updates. We had added like audio recording to the phone app, and they were like, "Well, let's add that to the watch app so that we can record audio on the watch and then send it up to the phone." And so those were my two first like real big projects, and those were a bit daunting because share extensions, it's sort of like you feel like you're like siloed and like, how do I get all the code from the main app over into this share extension and have them like talk to each
Mhm.
other? And then similarly with the watch, especially in like I mean, I'm pretty sure watch development is a lot easier now and a lot more
I'm
robust.
assuming
But
WatchKit.
back in that day, it was like yeah, it was like sending packages of strings like back and forth, and it's like I feel like pretty limited, and like this is telling. I need to tell my watch like which preferences are available, like if the user can even use audio recording because it's a premium feature. So we need to like send a little package of a little like user info dictionary with all these prefs in it and sort of parse the strings and use that to decide how this watch app is going to work. So both of those were kind of mystifying experiences of like getting out of the main app where I felt comfortable and getting into sort of these external um, extensions, I guess you could say.
And was this like several months into working there, or was it like after 3 weeks you're just kind of diving deep into the deep end of iOS extensions?
It was probably within the first couple months. Yeah, I don't remember the exact timeline, but I just remember starting on the share extension and being like, this is wow. And I remember how long it took me so long to figure it out. Um, and and the watch stuff as well. And it's funny because I'll still have to go back to like the watch stuff hasn't really been touched since I did that. You know, I've made a few updates since then, but it's funny going back to that code that like hasn't really been messed with, but besides me when I was new,
Hmm.
and being like, wow, like I just like even the names of my classes, my use of camel case, it was just like I had no idea what I was doing when I wrote all of this.
Yeah, we
So
often tell our students, because both of us are instructors now, we often tell our students there's no worse programmer than like past you. So always leave comments, always
mhm.
leave good commits, because past you is a real thing, and past you will come back to bite you in the future if you're not careful.
Totally.
Uh, and no matter how
Yeah.
much experience you have, past you is always the worst because they don't think like you for some reason. It's like, what were they thinking?
Yeah, so true.
So kind of as an instructor, we often have a lot of students that wonder what that first job is going to be like. And I'm assuming when you joined the team, you were joining as a junior, right? They had that full expectation.
Hmm.
So were you able to get mentorship and help when you needed it, or were you kind of on your own for a lot of tasks?
Yeah. You know, and I don't know how it is in every
Hmm.
company, but I was definitely able to get a lot of mentorship and help. Like I said, you know, we're a team of six. Yeah, I think we're five or six right now. And three of us all went to the same like coding boot camp, right? So like the people that had been to the boot camp before, they knew what it was like to be an intern. They knew what it was like to be me. So they were always happy and willing to help me. And then we had a senior developer who he's a really good teacher and you know has done a ton to help me learn and he was actually one of the reasons. I mean, I as I said, my brother was pretty well connected in the iOS development world, and so as I was going to this code boot camp, he he had he knew who was at day one, and so when we'd go to sort of these meetups, he'd be like, "Oh, I really want you to meet this senior engineer. I really want you to work with him because I think he'll teach you a lot." And so you know the stars aligned, and it just so happened that I got to go work at the same company as this senior engineer that he wanted me to learn from. So yeah, definitely, you know, my iOS development knowledge is you know, definitely comes from my mentors and the people that helped me as I got started.
And when you sort of did need help, how did you go about like asking? Did you just reach out to the person? Like, what was that process? Because I know it can feel intimidating for someone just starting out. It's like these people, these seniors, they have a mountain of knowledge and they don't want to be bugged by lowly me asking the silly questions over and over again. So, what do you kind of recommend to someone that's just joining a team that needs to ask questions but is perhaps too shy or not sure how to go ahead and ask? What sort of advice would you have for them?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a good balance to strike when it comes to asking questions because it can be easy to sort of get to get too comfortable with asking questions that it's like the second you can't figure something out on your own, you're like, oh, I'm going to ask someone. But like the most learning that you're going to get in iOS development is not knowing how to do something, right? And having to look at documentation, maybe having to look at tutorials. And so there were certainly times where I got too comfortable asking the senior engineer questions, and it was really sort of you know stopping my learning. I was so reliant on him that I couldn't do much. Um, but you know, but depending on the culture of the company, I think you know they want you to ask questions. They want you to learn. They understand that you're a junior developer and that you're not going to know everything, but they also expect you to take some time to like figure it out. And I think that's why, as an instructor, we ask our students like, don't ask for help until you've spent like at least 20 minutes on working on this problem on your own, because once you have that crutch there and you think like the crutch is always available, you're always going to use it. And even still, as I sometimes I still feel like a junior developer, even though I've been doing this for 3 years. I still have to reach out to my senior developer at times for help. And obviously the problems I'm trying to solve are a lot more complex than when I was a junior. But they're still willing to help. They still, we work for the same company. We have the same mission. We want each other to be successful. So don't be afraid to ask questions, but also don't be afraid to spend some time in the dark, not knowing how to do something, because that's when you're sort of going to level up and develop your skills.
Hmm. And I tell my students this all the time. There's some students are comfortable just DMing me for some reason to ask directly, and I always tell them ask public, like re-ask this question in public channel, and I'll answer it there, because the best skill that you can kind of nurture while you're still learning is how to ask questions. There's so many times where you
Hmm.
just don't know how to phrase the question, or you don't know how to explain what you've tried and why it didn't work, as like trying to find that proper solution, that you just kind of give up and just ask someone, because you're hoping that they kind of have the same experience that you have had, and therefore they can kind of dive in and get to that answer very quickly. But oftentimes you're on your own. You need to search Google, and you need to know what to type in Google to get the
Yeah.
answer you want to find. You need to know, once you
Totally.
find the Stack Overflow question that's in Google, you need to know how to scan through all those answers to be able to tell this one's bogus, this one's bogus, this one's bogus. Oh, this one's related to what I want to know, and be able to do that very fast.
Hmm.
So oftentimes you might like ask a senior and they have no clue, so they go to Google, they type some gibberish out. You're like, why did they think to search that? But lo and behold, they command click a few of the links and very quickly just scan through 4 Stack Overflow questions and find the answer that they want. And it's more often than not, they know the answer already. They just forgot how it worked. So they just need that quick reminder,
Yeah.
that quick tick of inspiration to kind of remember how to approach that problem. And then once they find it, they're kind of good to go. So oftentimes
Yeah.
development
Totally.
is not about like remembering every answer under the sun. It's about remembering how to ask the question to get the answer that you're looking for, because there's no way we can remember everything. UIKit is massive. And now you have to learn UIKit and Swift UI. So it's like you're not going to be able to remember everything. But if you can remember just the
Hmm.
little pieces to get you that answer, that's like totally way worth it.
Totally. Yeah.
So, Johnny, what are your current interests as a developer at the moment? Like, what kind of APIs and frameworks are you really fascinated by?
Yeah, that's a good question. I I've become more excited about Swift UI as I've used it. Um, I think I was a little bit apprehensive at the beginning. It just and it still does. It feels so different. It's like it just, even though it's Swift, right? Like it just feels, it's a different way of thinking, right? Because like the architecture of it is different. Like having sort of these grouped elements, building out your view, but they have like no knowledge of each other, right? Like previously we could use like outlets and IB actions, and like we could use those wherever we wanted in the code, like they were available anywhere inside of the class. But now you've got these separate UI elements, and they don't know like, oh, I don't know that there's necessarily that switch there. I don't know that there's this view. They're all sort of referencing these state properties, and it's really cool once you learn how to use it. And but it's such a different mind shift from what I had experienced, right?
Hmm.
Um, but now that I'm starting to get more into it, um, whenever I like approach having to like build out a view controller, building it with UIKit just feels like yucky. Like it just like, oh, there's so many things involved. Like it's like this table, I have to go build this custom cell and like set up all these constraints. And it's like in Swift UI, I could have this in like 3 lines and it works perfectly. Like, so I'm starting to move more into the buy-in of Swift UI, and so I love taking opportunities to learn Swift UI. Um, other specific frameworks, I don't know. At day one, I work in so many different things, that I don't know if I have a favorite. I just enjoy being able to get into something new, right? And that's one of the things that I enjoy most about being a programmer is it's like I'm not doing the same thing every day. It's what bug am I trying to learn today, and what do I have to learn to be able to solve this? And so it's a really learning focused career, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, it certainly never ends, right?
Yep.
You have to constantly stay on top of things, and the easiest way to do that is to be genuinely fascinated by it, and it's easier to get genuinely fascinated by it once you start understanding it more, right? Like at the beginning,
Hmm.
you might not
Totally.
understand any of it, and it's like, why would anyone be interested in any of this? And then you start learning how things are put together, and then you become curious about like how did they put that together, and I want to be able to build that same thing. So it very much
Hmm.
is an endless learning opportunity, and an endless learning obligation at the same time.
Totally. Yeah, and like when I first started, I remember always thinking like, oh, tutorials are like the only way to learn anything. And it's because I would open Apple's documentation and I just did not understand the documentation. Like it made no sense to me. Like even just seeing like in it, I was like, what does that mean? Like what is the in it? I don't know. I didn't learn very much, right? If I didn't even understand like what the in it was trying to tell me, because I thought like you had to specifically call like init instead of creating a new instance, blah blah blah. But but once you learn to actually read Apple's documentation, it opens up a world of like possibilities because their documentation certainly has weaknesses from time to time, but the documentation is generic enough to be able to like get the things from it that you need to apply to your app. Whereas when you start doing like tutorials and whatnot, it's like you got to go step by step. Okay, first we're going to set up a single view app, and like you have to go through like all of these hoops in order to get to like the one part that you actually care about. But yeah, once you learn to actually look at documentation and read it in like a generic way, it's though like the world is your oyster, right? Like you can do pretty much anything once you learn to read and understand Apple's documentation.
Hmm. And aside from documentation, there's also Apple's WWDC videos, which are a wealth of
Hmm.
information. And if
Totally.
you're an iOS developer, it's on you to kind of keep up with those because there are a ton of them that get released at the same time every year.
Hmm.
And it's almost so much information that it's tough to keep up with, right?
Hmm.
And
Totally. But as long as you watch them right, you remember. I think I watched a video about this. I'm gonna go rewatch that one.
mhm,
Uh, so you may not remember everything, but you'll at least remember that like it's been talked about
you've
before.
indexed it
So,
just enough to be able to find
yep.
it. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
and like for myself, my first WWDC, I was like barely 18, and that was because you had to be 18 or older to go to them, unlike now.
Hmm.
So I like my direct comparison was either high school classes or my first college lectures, and I always found WWDC way more interesting than the college lectures because that was something that I was genuinely passionate about. Um, what were your thoughts kind of seeing one of those sessions for the first time? Was it something interesting? Was it something so overwhelmingly technically dense that it was kind of like boring? How was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little bit of both. It depends on the session that you watch. There are some sessions that I still watch, and I'm like, I have no idea what they're even talking about. Especially as the Swift UI videos come out, and they're like talking about like combine and syncing and publishing and blah blah blah. Like it's so new and like overwhelming, and it's like I don't even know like how I would use this. at this point. And I think that's kind of the feeling during WWDC. Like I said, it's just kind of try to soak in as much as you can. And then, as your need for doing that kind of thing comes up, you'll eventually find a way to use the things that they've talked about. So in my early days, especially, more of the WWDC videos were confusing to me, and learning to follow like their code snippets, and it's like, what the heck? They just pushed one button and all of a sudden they have like 100 lines of code. Like, how did they do that? That's crazy. Like, they've got snippets. So, but yeah, like it's exciting, to be there, to be involved, to sort of learn from the masters, learn from those that have actually built these APIs, how it's supposed to work. And I think it's just a fun community and environment to be a part of. I've never been able to like attend a live session, but at work during that whole week, like we're given the freedom to watch sessions together. Got the nice big screen. We watch them together. We can pause them. We can talk about the things and how they apply to what we're currently working on. So it's one of the most exciting weeks of the year for me, honestly, is being able to listen to WWDC and see like how technology is progressing.
Mm-hmm. And now that they're almost entirely virtual, there's almost no benefit to like being there in person, especially if you don't have to spend,
Hmm.
spoiler alert, $1,600 for the ticket, and then spoiler alert number two, $4,000 for a hotel room, because San
Yep.
Francisco and San Jose are atrociously expensive. So if you can have your company pay for that, you are tremendously lucky. If you're kind of going on your own dime, that's almost a fool's errand unless you have a very good reason to be going there to network with other developers. But the
Hmm.
energy that you're describing is absolutely real. Like everyone just kind of stops everything that they're doing and building a new project, playing around with those new APIs, seeing what's possible, and that energy is like everywhere. You really feel like you can build anything with all the new stuff that's coming
Totally.
up. Um,
Yeah.
so aside from development, are there any interests that are kind of like borrowing from your developer's mind, at all? So, for example, as soon as I kind of became a developer, I started having the mindset of, oh, there's a bug in real life. This doorknob does not twist exactly the way it should. I could fix that. Um, so that's perhaps a bad example, but are there any facets of your everyday life that have changed ever since you kind of became a developer?
Hmm. That's a good question. I mean, I feel like ever since I've become the developer, I've become like the token IT person in my family, both my wife's family and my family. That's like, oh, like my computer's not working, or my phone's not working, or
You work for Apple, right?
this app isn't working, right? It's sort of like all comes on me as sort of the token developer IT guy that's like, I can fix all things tech. So that's certainly, it's not a day-to-day thing, but I often get requests. My mom will FaceTime me and be like, why can't I log into this? And it's just like, all right, let's figure it out. Like, but I'm sure most of us have experienced that, right? It's like as soon as like we're the computer guru, like we solve all tech problems. Like, oh, your TV's not working, it's not turning on. Like, let's call Johnny up. Like,
Johnny will be able to debug this.
so yes, because I can debug apps, I apparently can debug every piece of tech, whether it's a speaker or a TV or anything. And we eventually figure it out because those types of bugs are generally, oh, like you need to just plug it in, or oh, this thing is fried, it's never going to work again. Like,
It's simple solutions.
so yep.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing. I'll be sure to forward my requests over to you because I've long stopped accepting those. And I'll put it this way: I begrudgingly accept them, so I make it painfully obvious that I do not want to be in the situation that they're putting me in. I will fix their issue, or I'll try to fix it. But it's going to be a painful experience for both of us, and that has lessened the
Yeah.
load, thankfully enough. Um, and you kind of have to do that because as soon as you are that person in someone's life that knows a little bit more about computers, you are the de facto person that they're
Hmm.
going to ask for everything. And the worst case is when they ask you
Totally.
something that you have no clue about. It's like, for me, it's
Hmm.
how do I fix the printer on my Windows computer? I'm like, I don't even know how to use a Windows computer. I know there's a start menu
Yeah, I
somewhere.
don't even know how to turn that
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
I know the start menu has disappeared. My extent. I have no idea where the printer would be. So uh, yeah, there's not much that we can do in many situations. So we kind of have to set expectations.
Yeah.
And anyone who's kind of getting into development, you're surely feeling this. The second thing people are going to start to assume is you work for Apple, no matter what you do, because you make apps, so you must
Hmm.
work for Apple, right? Hopefully that sentiment has
Right.
been going down lately. I haven't been meeting new people, so less chance for them to kind of re-ask me that question. So I don't know if it's still going on, but that is a second thing that everyone just starts to assume little by little.
Yep.
um, so, as kind of like the last topic of questions I wanted to ask you, assuming you had
Hmm.
unlimited time and unlimited budget and you're just free to chase your curiosities, what would you dive into next? Whether it's tech related or complete tech unrelated.
Yeah, I think tech related, I would want to spend a lot more time learning Swift UI. I have books. I have, there's the Paul Hudson's like 100 Days of Swift UI that are all things that like I would love to get into and spend more time on. But at my current job, I wear many hats, and I unfortunately can't take a lot of time to like sort of sit down and learn things that aren't directly related to what I'm working on. So I would definitely want to spend more time with Swift UI because I think it is the future. Whether that be in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, I don't know. But I think that things will move in that direction of Swift UI, and so having a good understanding of the APIs associated with Swift UI, knowing how to set up view models and whatnot, I would definitely want to spend more time there because I still feel a little bit uncomfortable when it comes to like having to solve issues when it comes to Swift UI, and especially like debugging Swift UI is it's just again it's different, right? Like you can't like put these breakpoints exactly how you want them. um, some of it's there's overlap for sure, but the debugging process feels different. So I'd love to spend more time in that. um, I think ultimately, as I sort of move in my career trajectory, is being more involved in like big picture stuff for applications. So like at my current job, working more on like business strategy type stuff of like what are the features that we can add to give us like a competitive advantage or to improve this or that. So maybe it's blasphemous to say on this podcast, but like I don't know if I like want to always be coding. Like I think I'll always have an interest in coding and always like enjoy building stuff, but I think ultimately I want to move more into like letting other people build stuff and let me be like the visionary of like what to build. And so I would spend more time learning sort of product management, and sort of developing A/B testing and whatnot for applications.
And it's interesting you say that because that ties a tiny bit into what you were originally studying, right? The more business side of things.
Hmm.
And that's oftentimes the case that I try to explain to people is development is just a tool. Like it's
Hmm.
not the end result. Like we as developers, I'm sure there are some that do strive to develop just to be writing code. But for a lot of us, writing code is just a tool to be building what we want to build or to get the result that we want to get. So it's a tremendously useful tool because turns out you can invent new things with just a computer. Like you
Hmm.
don't need to have an entire workshop at your disposal to kind of play around with actual like substances and three-dimensional objects that you need to combine and make sure they don't collapse and kill people. Like none of that is in the picture when you're a developer because you can just play around. You have a simulator right in front of you. The computer is your simulation, so you can kind of play
Hmm.
and see what will happen in all sorts of variety of situations. So there are certainly those that kind of like that aspect of it, but there are many others that just want to
Hmm.
build something, and this is the tool to build it. Just like any other skill ultimately. Like you learn engineering not to be an engineer but to build a bridge. um, so
Hmm.
there's those aspects of development that are certainly kind of glossed over many times, because a lot of people concentrate on, oh, you need to have a computer science degree and you need to have a genuine fascination in coding, when ultimately you're just coding to achieve a goal, um, whatever
Totally.
that goal
Yep.
is. um,
Yeah.
so I had one final question for you, and we didn't touch on it too much, but how did you kind of make that transition from junior developer to mid-level developer to instructor teaching others about development? How was that transition for you?
Yeah. So I became an instructor probably just like I think it was a couple months after I finished my own program. Um, it wasn't like the instruction that I do right now. So the code school that I work now is they used to have like an intro to iOS course, and the company was still pretty new, so there wasn't a lot of people um, there to do the job, and I had some connections at Lambda, and Spencer was there. Spencer from this podcast was actually like my main instructor at my code school, so I learned a lot from him. And so he was at the same code school, and talking and working with them, they were like, oh yeah, we need somebody to teach this intro to iOS course. And so I was kind of going over the principles of Swift and setting up like a basic table view and a detailed view. And so it was all stuff that I felt relatively good about teaching because I had learned it, and so I knew like the Swift principles and concepts. Now anytime a student asked me like, well, why is it that way, I was just like, I don't know. Don't worry about that right now. Just you want to know how to, set up a loop or whatnot. Like that's all you got to worry about. And then, the opportunity came for me to move out of this intro to iOS course and to actually teach, the students who were in the program. And I remember there were a few lessons that literally, like, my preparation for the lesson was the first time I had ever seen any of that stuff. And so I had to like learn it right before I was about to teach it. And and so that's the importance of being able to, like, as a developer, like being able to know how to learn things. Because I think that skill is what kicked in. It's like, I've never used this before, but I'm going to learn it right now so that I can teach it. And it's possible my students may have noticed a little bit like, he seems kind of iffy about this topic, but I definitely felt like I pulled it off like well enough for the students to understand what they needed to. So the transition, at least there at the beginning, was sort of that imposter syndrome. That's like, I'm about to teach something that I've literally just learned. Like I've never used this like in real life. But now, like, after teaching it so many times, that I had the opportunity to learn those things myself, and now can teach them more confidently. But yeah, there at the beginning, it was sort of like, okay, learn, teach, learn, teach, learn, teach, um, and somehow pulled it off. But it was definitely an awesome experience for my learning as a junior, because I think that one of the best ways to learn something is learn it well enough to teach it, right? Like as soon as you have to teach something, it sort of kicks you into gear of like, well, I've got to learn this. I've got to figure it out because I have to teach it to somebody
Yeah,
else.
I was just gonna say that there's like two major benefits to you as someone with not necessarily a mountain of experience going into teaching others. One, you
Hmm.
learn very well those things that you need to teach, because there's no better way to learn something than to teach it to others and realize where your own deficiencies are, because it becomes instantly,
Hmm.
if it's not obvious to the student, it's instantly obvious to you, because you're like, how should I explain this in a way that I currently understand that's not going to confuse the student? Because ultimately,
Hmm.
there's varying levels and ways that you can explain something. There's the black box, oh, it works this way because this is the way it works, all the way down to, oh,
Hmm.
there are electrons and they move in this way, and that's what ultimately causes the pixel on your screen to change color and it look like you're scrolling. Like you can go anywhere in between that range to kind of explain something, but
Hmm.
to a student who's just learning something, knowing the why is not important. It's knowing the how to
Hmm.
get something there and get that muscle memory going, so that way you can just use it and it's a practical tool that in your tool belt. Afterwards, you can learn the why. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a benefit to you as someone just coming in to instruct. You can kind of learn those things, and as a secondary benefit to the student, you were just in their shoes not too long ago. You know what it's like to have those same struggles. You know what those specific pain points are, so you can focus on them. Something that's extremely difficult for someone like me who has a wealth of experience but hasn't really spent a lot of time with people that don't know much about programming and teaching them
Right.
programming. I have to completely change my own mindset to a way that someone else will understand. And very oftentimes, my explanation may go way over their head, and they don't know what the next question to ask is because they didn't understand the answer to the question they asked, and that's intimidating. So
Yeah.
sometimes having someone with a ton of experience is not what you always want in an instructor. It's someone who has been in your shoes but knows a bit more, enough to explain it to the level that you need it to be explained, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Okay, so is there anything else you would like to share with our lovely, lovely audience in terms of your own experience and things that they should kind of strive to as potentially junior developers or senior developers or mid-level developers or people wanting to be instructors or any of the above?
Yeah, I would say, there's a common there's like a common acronym in sales that's like, ABC, right? Like always be closing. And I would say for developers, it's ABL, like always be learning. That there's there's so much information out there. There's so much to learn, so many APIs to get involved in and to learn. And so don't be overwhelmed with how much there is to learn, and but just continue to enjoy learning and building and developing things. And then for if you're looking for a specific job, like I've talked about this on the show before, but like find your niche, right? Like find what are the APIs that interest you most? What do you enjoy working on? Start building apps that focus on using those APIs so that when you go to, I'm really into fitness. Like I've used all of the health kit APIs and the fitness APIs, core motion, blah, blah, blah. You go to Nike and say, look, I know these APIs like the back of my hand. I know how to set up this and this and this. So find your niche, find the thing that interests you most, so that as you go into those job interviews, you'll just, you'll kill it, right?
Definitely. So thank you so much, Johnny, for kind of diving into all these like intimate details about how you got into development, how you kind of express yourself as a developer. It was really fascinating learning from that point of view because it's been so long for myself to kind of be even close to that beginning stage. Like for me, I was just a kid, kind of learning about this and learning about it, not even knowing it would become a career for the most part. So it's very fascinating hearing it from the other point of view of someone who's actively pursued it in terms of trying to find a career. It's
Yeah.
truly interesting.
Thanks. Yeah. No, it was a great discussion.
So as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Code Completion to know when new episodes get released, and feel free to tweet at us if there are any topics you'd like us to dig into, or anything that we talked about this episode that you kind of want to learn more about. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's really your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. So once again, my name is Dimitri, and I was joined today by Johnny, who you can find at Johnny D Hicks. That's JohnnyDhicks on Twitter. And we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.